gentlemen, welcome to Imaginative's Indigenous Gaming Panel here in the Digital Media Arcade. Is it not amazing, right? Oh, that was just so sad. My name is Isidra Cruz and I am the festival coordinator. Welcome, welcome. I would like to acknowledge the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and please forgive my pronunciation, the Haudenosaunee. Did I get it? Did I get it?
You got it. Good enough.
Whew, good enough. I'm close. Not quite there. I'd also like to thank the Harold Greenberg Fund for sponsoring the industry series. Thanks to them, we get to put on a lot of really fantastic events. Come on in, guys. It's going to be squishy in this place, so come in. Yep, squish in, squish in. I'd also like to tell everyone to go online, download our app, both for Apple and Android, as well as don't forget to fill out our audience survey. This year we have a wonderful prize, original art, thanks to, I should say his name, Milton Winberg. So we've got some beautiful original art from Milton Winberg up for grabs, which will be drawn post-festival. And from that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth.
So were we going to run a trailer first, or shall I switch to slides?
Yes, we are going to run that trailer first.
And it doesn't switch. Okay. We can all make our own music. I think it might be optional. There you go! Oh! MC in the house! I think we need some interpretive dance. Thank you.
I'm a trained professional.
All right. So welcome to the Indigenous Gaming Panel. And really, we want to open this up to your questions. This is about you being here and present in this moment with this illustrious panel of professionals who are really living it day to day. So I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves first, and then I will ask 2 questions, and then we're going to open it up to the rest of you. And then I might be jumping back and forth from time to time because we do have some visuals to go along with some of the work of people here. So with that, I'll start with Jason Edward Lewis.
Hello, everybody. Jason Edward Lewis. I'm a professor at Concordia University, interactive artist. Oh, here, I guess I have a mic. Here, interactive artist and software developer. So, and I direct a project. I direct a research network, co-direct a research network called Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace, which has been looking at how us Native folks are using digital media in various ways for a little over 10 years now. And direct a new initiative called the Initiative for Indigenous Futures, which is looking at how we can do work within our communities to help us actually really sort of concretely imagine what the life of our 7th generation might be like.
Hello, I'm Nathalie Clermont. I'm the Director of Program Management at the Canada Media Fund. At the fund, we finance television and related digital media, but we are also financing games through our experimental stream, We finance approximately 35 to 40 games each year, and we put the $25 million in games each year. So this is a fund that is targeting people like you, so you'll get to know a bit more during this presentation about the CMF and how to apply and what we finance exactly.
We dropped her there so you would stay for the whole.
My name's Ernest Webb. I'm from Minority Media. We're based out in Montreal. Well, we started in 2010. I'm a classically trained gamer. Started with Pong. When I started playing Pong, that opened up a whole new world for me. And what I see now, it's almost, I can only imagine what the young people are experiencing when they put on the headset, you know, the eyepiece, and then enter that world. So I can only imagine, you know, the excitement, the possibilities that are there. And so it's exciting times to be in this business right now, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Ryan Oliver. I am an owner and a producer with Bingwa, which is based out of Nunavut, BC, and Ontario. We have locations in all three. And really what Bingwa began as, when it began in Nunavut, it's really about the ability to use technology to interpret and disseminate and pass along culture and cultural teachings and language as well. It began with localization of existing games into Inuktitut and has moved into kind of original product in that regard. So, and we've moved since increasingly into further technology in terms of virtual reality. So, yeah, that's me.
My name's Naila Inukshuk. Well, my name's a little redundant. I'm an Inuk from Nunavut. I'm also an owner at Pingwa. I focus more on the virtual reality side of things and narrative storytelling through devices like the Oculus Rift, which is over there. We've got Google Cardboard, and we kind of combine that with gaming. I come from the film world, but the medium of virtual reality is kind of more of a nerdier version of film. So yeah, so that's me.
Excellent. Anin Wabananong Indigenous, and meanwhile, I'm currently living in Minnesota. My family is from around Sault Ste. Marie. I'm Anishinaabe and Métis. And I just make stuff. I make games, and I work as a designer and an artist, and more recently a coder. And I also work in comics and interactive media, and hold a PhD in interactive arts and technology, which means I just experiment and explode things and figure things out. So with that, I'll move to a more general. There's a lot of good work going on here. So I'm just really excited about how many more people are involved in game development right now, and how much more self-determination there is. So with that, I really just want to open up to the voices here and start the first question with, what do you see coming up for yourselves or for others in games over the next maybe year or two, or your hopes?
I guess I'll start. I'm right here. I'm on the wrong side. Get to start. One of the things that we do with Aboriginal territories in cyberspace is we run the skins workshops on Aboriginal storytelling and video game design, and we've been doing that since 2008 with a lot of help from Elizabeth. And what's really exciting right now is it feels like, so when we started in 2008, there was like you and Michael, and like, I don't know, we could name like on maybe one hand the number of Native people we knew who were actively involved in developing video games. And and now it's 7 years later, 7 years later. Even though it may not feel like it sometimes, it's kind of exploded. It's really amazing to sit here in this room and see a number of games that have been made by Indigenous creators, and also to see other people getting into the game of mounting workshops that are focused on creating the next generation of Indigenous designers, and so Indigenous game designers. So for me, part of what we're doing over the next year is we've focused primarily on video games for PCs in our workshops. But part of what we're doing going forward for the initiative on Indigenous Futures is we're sort of like expanding that outward. So we're going to be looking at developing for mobile, developing for VR, developing for other things like Second Life, and sort of try to push forward the sort of the number of places where you can find Native people, both being creators but also being represented in a way that more accurately reflects how we actually live and our own understandings of our histories. So I think that it's super exciting, the work, some of the work that's come out of Minority, the work that Pingwak is doing, and it's great because it feels like we're sort of like really kind of hitting a certain stride in terms of the number of people who are actively making stuff, and that also the tools have gotten to the point where it's the hurdles to getting something onto the phone or working on a console are considerably less than they were 5 years ago. So we do more workshops, try to get more youth trained in this sort of stuff, and excited about making this stuff because it's really important that we tell our stories ourselves, right? And so those stories could be in film, they can be in video, they can be in immersive environments, or they could be through video games. And that we have the ability now, and we have we have an existing talent pool, and we're growing a new talent pool, so that we can do that kind of work across a really wide range of both communities and sort of technologies. So I'm very excited about the next year. I think that with our workshops and with the people that we're working with and other things that are going on, I think that next year there's going to be just even more really great stuff to look at, say, within this exhibition.
I can go next. I think to follow up kind of on what Jason had said, a lot of what Pingwa does as well, we began very similar, I think, to what Jason's been doing. We began code clubs across Nunavut, and so I think, like, in answer to the question, one of the things that's most exciting and what I think we're pushing towards seeing is really kind of recognizing that gaming and programming especially is more accessible than it's ever been, and development is more accessible than it's ever been, and the ability for anyone from age 5 to 99 is to express themselves through an interactive medium is more accessible than it's ever been. And so that's really where I think I'm most excited about that. And in terms of what Jason was saying about people being able to tell their own stories, if your desired art form is through interactive media, which has always been a very intimidating thing. It's lines of code and it's physics and it's math, and it isn't anymore. And it's really, really accessible. Even in Toronto, for people who are from Toronto, working with a group like Dames Making Games, anything that's happening at Ubento Miso, there's just so much support and such accessible languages for programming and for developing games that, even if all you've ever done is work within a Word document, you can get started and you can start to do that. And I think the stories that are going to come out of that, and increasingly the creators that we see come out of that are going to be extremely exciting.
And I think we are very lucky in Canada to have a lot of financing, in fact, for games, programs like the Experimental Stream at the CMF or other organizations at the Independent Production Fund or Bell Fund or places like that. There's a lot of money available for well-established companies like Minority Media, who is probably the most successful company in the Experimental Stream, with more, I think it's around 8 projects that you got from this fund from the beginning. So if they're not the first, they're the second for sure. So it's very impressive, but there is space also for startups, people that are new to the industry, that knows how it works and have experience. But there's place for startups as well, and we are financing a lot of startups. Also, I think you've just submitted, if I'm right, your first application
Yes.
2-3 weeks ago.
I was going to say, one of the things we're most
Not
excited
awkward
about
at all.
We're really excited.
one of the things we're really excited about is the eventual CMF approval. That it sure is coming. Now that we've been on a panel together.
No pressure. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my checks with me today.
We brought ours. I'm staying out of this one.
And just so you know, it's a selective program. We are working with a jury of international and national experts that are helping us selecting the most innovative project, because the focus of this program is innovation. And the innovation can be found in the content itself or in the technology that is developed. We are financing games. Maybe approximately 60% of our envelope in the experimental stream is going to games. We also support mobile application, web series, interactive web docs, enabling technologies, e-books, things like that. But games is taking the lion's share of the fund. Yeah, it's a very, very competitive program. Very people are coming a lot, and the success rate is probably around 30%. It was lower than that in the past, but because we are growing the envelope year after year for this program, the success rate is a bit better. But if you don't apply, you won't get money. So try your luck, work hard, and apply for sure. And you were talking about the future and what is coming in. We are seeing a lot of VR projects right now. I think it's the new thing. The Lens or Google Glass or whatever, the creator of these.
The cardboard you
exactly.
see next to Nyla.
And it works well.
She can model that.
Yeah. They demand content, so it's a great time for a content producer to produce material to go on these technologies. At the beginning of when we launched the fund in 2010, we saw a lot of mobile game. You know, the tablets were starting to go out, and the smartphones and everything. We are still financing a lot of mobile games, but we see also a trend towards console games. It's coming back to console games now, or PC games, so more AAA games and everything, but there's still a lot of mobile, more casual games that are financed.
For me, it's about having fun. And I think that's what we try to deliver is, fun. And in terms of the future, I hope to be working with some of these young people here, because that is the future. The Gear VR. About 2 years ago or so, the engineers came in with one of those eyepiece, the goggle thingies there. And they're like, this is the future, this is where it's going to be at. And so we've had about 3 years of thinking about it, working with it and checking out it, seeing what its limitations are. And I think, when I first tried it, my mind went 100 kilometers an hour, thinking of possibilities. And right now, we have a prototype in our office, which is you have to set up sensors in the room. So that sets the perimeter of the size of the room for you. So you put on the goggles, and you have a couple of hand pieces like controllers. And then that puts you in a whole other world. You can walk around in the room, and when you get too close to a wall, it lets you know. And so you can sort of walk around and you got controllers. And so that's what we're working on right now. We're working on a couple of games. And so it's exciting times right now. And as I said, you know, when I played Pong, that put me in a whole new world. And so I think we're light years away from that right now, but I think, you know, we do have to go back to be able to go into the future.
This is great because I think that it's actually going to be all of the ways. So for myself, I don't think mine's even on.
You have to kind of make out with it.
Oh, okay. Nice. Thanks, woman. You traded. So for me in my own work, I don't have the awesomeness that is the Canada Media Fund. I'm in the States, so I'm on my own. And so for me, it's actually not feasible to go into a research and development stage. So for me over the next year in my own work, I'm going to be focusing on mobile because I feel that, especially after releasing Invaders, that it's the most accessible way to reach as many people as possible. And with the kind of work that I'm doing, it's more about getting messages out to people. And so that's going to be my mode, is just what can I do on my own, because I don't have the money to pay other people. I'm just doing this. Now, on the other end, what I'm hoping to see, I'm very excited about youth. I've been involved in youth game development workshops with Aboriginal territories and cyberspace for many, many years. And that's a lot of where I started from, was how can we get access to the technology and the skills to create teams of our own, entirely self-determined teams. Having said that though, now that I'm at this stage of my career, really what I'm doing right now is I'm looking around at all of the amazingly strong creatives who are already in graphic design, film, they could be in music, they could be in other areas. And that's how Invaders came to be. I looked at what work already was there with Stephen Paul Judd, and I went to Trevino Brings Plenty, who's never made game music ever before, but he's made music, and he can watch a tutorial, and he pulled it together. So I'm just as excited about all the people who are founded. They have a foundation already, and they're ready to go right now with ideas and with collaboration and with where they're at in the industry. So my greatest hope is also to see everyone just making games right now. You know, I don't want to keep waiting for there to be more programmers. We really just, everybody just make what you want to make, just start prototyping it right now, even if it's just paper prototype. I've been in situations where all I've had is cardboard and maybe tin foil. And I've managed to at least get ideas out enough that I could communicate with them and then build on them. So.
Can I just do
Yeah.
a follow-up? It's also a bit of a shameless plug too. So I teach in a program called Computation Arts at Concordia University. And one of the sort of focuses that we have is on game design. So I really encourage any of you young people out there who are thinking about university in the next couple of years, that it's a really amazing place to come. We have a guy named Pippin Barr, who's one of the top independent game designers in the world, who's teaching with us, and a couple other faculty, full-time faculty who are focused on that. And we're part of what's called the Technocultural Art and Games Research Center, which is, I would argue, is the best place to be doing games in a university setting in Canada. And you can get involved in the research through there. The research that I'm doing in my lab, you can get involved in that research as an undergraduate. And it's a really, really great way to, I think, to go about games in a way that isn't sort of the industry standard way, right? So I think that's a really good way, absolutely. And there's places to go and do that, sort of really intensive game focused thing. But this is within a larger design department and a larger design context and a faculty of fine arts. So it's a really rich place in terms of creativity coming from other places, not just focused on games. And we also just started a master's program that has its first intake in September. So if anybody's thinking about a master's programs, then come and talk to me because we'll be bringing in our first class. And we're super excited. Lots of resources. There's money. There's lots of academic money actually that can be used to support this sort of stuff. The grant that we just got is for 7 years. And so we have lots of time to work with people and develop young creators and help them, help them realize what their visions are.
And definitely also keep your eyes open for Indigenous roots here in Toronto and Dames Making Games. Just as you can see, the projects that are over here, and I hope to see a lot more and for that work to continue. Just from what I saw of the community when they were coming together, it was just such a beautiful experience and very supportive. I think Ryan, you
I was just to add, it's worth probably throwing just some names of software out that is free and that you can start with if you are interested. So the game on the screen, that's Elizabeth's, it was developed in Twine, right?
No, that was Dreamer. It's a trick. People think it's made in Twine. I did it that way on purpose because the thing that's different about it is that it embeds SoundCloud audio. And you can't do that in Twine without it being really complicated, so I was tricking people a bit. But yes.
Well, yeah, so like I had said before, even if you have zero programming experience, grab a program called Scratch, which came from MIT. And it's a really kind of nice little like Lego block way of programming, and you can just start. The best way to start making games is to just start and fail and try again and iterate and iterate and iterate. There is Twine, which is TWINE, which it creates text adventures and these kind of like interactive text adventures. Again, it's really straightforward. And if you're into 3D animation, to grab a free piece of software called Blender and just learn how to make models. And the more you try and the more you fail and occasionally succeed, then the better, kind of more refined your vision becomes, and all practice is good practice.
Yeah, and just to go back to Twine, not to knock that at all, that's actually a very good tool to use too. And so if you were interested in making a game that looked approximately like this, a choose your own adventure that's text-based, I'm currently working on projects that are based in language. And so even this, we're still working on translations in my language, Anishinaabe, and have found that these forms of interaction encourage true immersion with the language. Now, I would never suggest putting games before in-person interactions, but I do believe that games can push us other places with language that other forms of interaction have not been able to do before, curriculum and other sorts of things. So there's this really great project I'll mention, and then I'll open it up to questions here. But Joseph Arthur, who's from Hoopa Valley in California, took Dragon Age. Hey, you guys know Dragon Age, that game? It's that's big game, big industry game, right? Well, they knew that they wouldn't have the money to compete with the kind of graphics and interactivity that's in that game, the game mechanics. So they stripped all of the audio out, and they stripped all of the text out, and they put in their language, and they gave it to the youth, and they said, there's no English. Good luck playing this game. Well, the youth learned their language because they were so inspired to get through the next phases of the game and work through the stories that they were fully immersed. And they were fully immersed because they had to read, they had to listen to really understand what was happening in the game. Now, ideally, it would be great if we all had $1 bajillion and could make games like that that had our own representations in them, but that's not really going to happen right now. We can make games in Blender. We're using Blender for graphics and Unity, of course, and other game engines to this effect. So I hope to see more work like that. And so with that, I want to just open it up to questions because I feel like we touched on the second question I was going to ask, which was for anyone who's interested in getting into this, how would you go about that? So I think we're just at an open discussion point here, so I'm going to open it up to questions. And I also want to take a moment to note that I heard about a video game competition opening up, so maybe that could be our first starting, if you wouldn't mind telling us about that.
Sure. I'm Beatty Jameson. I'm the CEO of the Buffalo Native Resource Center in Buffalo. We brought some of our kids here up for the check out the festival, and we've had a tour of the Toronto School to look at some of the programs over there to give the kids some career options. Up here in the Canadian thing, it's just a little bit more Aboriginal based than it is in the States, which is where my husband and I have our own production company in Leland. But we're just received our new funding for the year, and one of the things that I put off is my charge is to work with our Native youth off territory. In my territory, I cover 4,000 Senecas that live off territory. We have 198 families that live here in the Toronto area as well that I'm responsible for. So I try to include a lot of things that involve people and bring us together. And one of the things that I saw that our kids were lacking and that I see that they like was the video game. So I put in for a video game challenge, and it was funded this year. We're going to have it in the early spring or early summer, so that we have time to get the specifics together to look for. I'm looking for native games. I really need someone to help me because I've gone to meetings and it's, I don't know the lingo. I'm lost. I'm really not a gamer, but my children, my grandchildren are. But I see that our kids, in our community centers, we've bought PlayStations and Wii's, and the kids are just immersed in it. And I would love to move to them to do the video design. And that's why we're here today, and that's why I brought my kids, because instead of just making it, a lot of our kids don't want to work anymore. They want to work home. They can see that we're like an example to them of doing great things on their own without the nation's help. So this is an opportunity for them to see what video gaming can do. And you mentioned the kind of dollars that we were talking about that are available. I really want them to think about this seriously as something that they could do at home on their own and be able to tell our stories as well. I just think it's a great opportunity.
Beautiful, yeah. So everyone who heard that, there's a competition coming up. So be thinking about that.
It's Niagara Casino.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and also for your thoughts. I think that this is what's so beautiful about games is thinking about intergenerational connections and involving the teachings, right, in these games, so that they will be passed on. Again, never to replace, but just that it's already so saturated. What we're doing here is giving ourselves an opportunity to express ourselves in these spaces and encourage them. And the other thing that I would add about that, for all of you who are interested in game development, it's not just about design or art or code. There's music, there's human resources, there's social media, there's doing the graphic design for the cover, there's writing the audio in Excel sheets, which can get really boring from experience, but that happens. And then there's also, working on the business side, right? And marketing, again, tying into social media. So there are many, many different roles. You don't just have to isolate yourself to being, okay, I have to have ideas, and it's about the ideas, and it's about being a designer. It's actually about being a part of a team and about being a part of a community and finding ways to expand on that. Okay, so questions or comments?
Yeah, just to expand on that, there are so many different roles that you can have within, and so for me, I focus on in virtual reality, and so Brian has like a bunch of the boring roles. Our friends have some of, I don't even know what they do. they make it so it's accessible to different platforms. But we're telling stories and we're creating experiences, and particularly with virtual reality, we're totally inventing how we make this content right now. We're 3D printing our rigs for our cameras because a camera doesn't exist yet that just shoots virtual reality. And we're playing around with different ways of telling these stories. And so I'll talk to, there's like, maybe a musician is like, hey, can we do this? And then I'll go back to our colleagues in Vancouver who I don't know what they do, and I'm like, can we make this happen? And they'll be like, yeah. And then or someone will be like, hey, can we jam 6 red cameras together? Red cameras are like crazy cameras. And then would you be able to stitch the video together, because we have to stitch it. We're totally making it up as we go along because it's so new. But it's we have people working with us that are not that much older than you guys, because you guys just get the stuff better. So
they know how to like slide their hands on the screen.
So yeah.
How long, when you start a new program for kids, like like what we're talking about, how long does it take for them to actually start making them?
We could have them make, like they could, you can shoot something the same day. The stitching process is it kind of depends. So that's where you take all the cameras, because we shoot with 360-degree cameras, so that when you put on the headset, so you put on something like this and you're like looking around, it feels like you're in that environment. That is something that at first can be learned, at least the most basic part can be learned really quickly, and we've shot stuff and then 15 minutes later we've had it at least kind of stitched together. Then there's a little
It's
more.
not month-long.
No, I had a project that, we had a project that we had a theatrical release for a film, and they needed a 360 trailer for it, and they were like, we need it in 2 weeks, and it was one shoot day, and that was including getting a location, like a movie theater, and getting the actor and writing a script. All of that happened within 2 weeks. So it's something that can be done. And that was just and I can show it to you after the talk. Then there are other projects that are a little more involved, where some of the more gaming aspects of virtual reality come in, where you might have branching paths, or where you're looking triggers something else. Those things take a little longer. Or if you are having animation involved, then of course that's going to take longer as well. So it totally depends on the project, but just filming with a 360 camera to make something available for a platform like Oculus Rift or Google Cardboard, this is something you can buy for as little as $4, and it's a VR headset that you just slip your phone into. It completely depends on the project.
In terms of the gaming side, like in terms of like the contest you're having as an example, and what we do, we have 5-day code clubs, what we call them, and so we go into an Nunavut community or an Indigenous community, and over 5 days the kids make a game a day. And so, like by the end they're not going to get jobs at Electronic Arts or at BioWare, but by the end they know how games work. They know, kind of cause and effect. And the first game that you make is kind of this little cat chasing a mouse game, and it teaches that. So like you can realistically, it depends what you want to do. You can get really complex and mathematical, but you can also create a game a day. You can, in terms of the contest, like what you're having, if it's starting with people with zero experience, I'll talk to you after because it's worth a discussion. In terms
There's
of
another question over here, so I want to make sure
Yeah, go
we
ahead.
start.
Actually, I have a comment on
Oh.
that subject. There's an easier way of developing games. It's actually a game itself on the Wii U's hardware. It's called Super Mario Maker, where you can make any platforming type element, and it already has all its design aspects in it and music. But you can play around with it and try and make your own levels, and that could help you start.
That's a really, really good point. It's one of the coolest ways to start is like I started programming just from making levels for the game Doom, and now my son is learning through Super Mario Maker. It's an excellent point.
I feel so old because I actually modded the real Mario. That was my first mod. It was native Mario. He had a backwards ball cap. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. That's it. I'm a vet now. Did Ernest?
I just to continue on to the what we were discussing earlier. We're setting up a booth here, so if you guys want to come try out our game, there's a new game that we're doing called Time Machine, and so you're in the time of the dinosaurs, and so you're on a quest, to study them and things like that. So we'll be setting up here later on. Also, we're working with the Cree School Board up in James Bay. We've designed a 3-year course, which they start at grade 9, secondary 3. And so they will learn all the different aspects. They will need to learn storytelling. They will learn writing, plus the coding, music, everything that goes into making a video game. And so at the end of those 3 years, they will have a finished video game. And so we're quite proud of that. And so they just implemented, like we're doing a pilot right now with one school. And so we just started that this fall. And so we're pretty excited about that one.
This is awesome. There's so many more opportunities. When I first started, I was working out of the community center, and the computers there that the university gave us were they didn't care about the community center, right? So the technology we got was the throwaway from the other academic departments. And so we would try to use it and just give up and use paper. So I'm just so excited to hear about all the opportunities happening all over and the access that's happening right now. We have many more questions here, so I want to make sure we get to those. Oh, yeah.
I have a question. I'm an Indigenous musician and filmmaker, and I was just wondering, how would an Indigenous musician like me work with an Indigenous video game maker? How does that work? You know, what would the approach be?
I can actually talk about that from experience. So Invaders, which is here at Imaginative and has now been released on Android, iPhone, iPad, and on the web, look for the music by Trevino Brings Plenty, and he even had so much fun, he made a tutorial. So you can go and look he went through that process as a musician and then learn how to make the game music, and then from there, ended up getting a contract where, you guys know the lacrosse championship, how it just came home? It was a big deal, right? And there's this huge 360 animation that went all around inside the center of the arena there. Well, Trevino Brings Plenty had an opportunity to create the music for that, which was a really amazing opportunity. So all of these happened by just simply developing your portfolio. This could be said about any area of work, but just create. Start creating and then make connections. Make connections at events like these, and your work will speak for you, but also at the stage that you're at, it's a really good idea to start networking, find other developers to work with, and then just continue to put out the work. It certainly has been working for Trevino. He's a poet and a writer, and very well versed in his area, but music is something that's his passion, you know, and so I think he's especially excited about the opportunities unfolding from that.
And also,
Trevino Brings Plenty. You can see on the app Invaders when you open it too.
So, and I also think that's another dimension of the modding or the skinning approach, right? Is that, you know, you can take games that have the ability to build levels or to add things to them or change them around, and you could just go in as a musician and start trying to make sounds, your own sounds, to go in those environments and start to figure out, you know, what does it mean to have to make sounds in like little 3-second clips? What does it mean to make a sound that's a reactive sound as opposed to part of a soundtrack, right? And you can just use that skeleton as a way to figure out how to transition from the sorts of music you make now, right, and the sorts of audio and music that's necessarily for an interactive experience, like a video game.
And where's Megan hiding at?
Right
Oh, she's hiding back here. So she's hiding back here. She worked on this game Lost, which is a very beautiful game. It has very beautiful music, and people have been commenting on the music in particular. So maybe you could speak a bit about how you came to work on that and just your modification of it.
So I should preface this by saying what was supposed to happen should not be in front of that. What was supposed to happen was I was supposed to be working with a musician, and he was going to make some original music, and then I was going to add some of my drumming in. And that didn't happen because we're both students and life got in the way. So what I did, and I really don't want you guys to think that this was easy, this is incredibly hard, but in one day, I basically went on to freesounds.org and I looked around for musicians that had put stuff up, and I found something that sounded really good. So what I did, and I've done this before, is I took one piece, and for each level, I changed the pitch. So that slowed it down or sped it up. And it just changed that piece of music just enough that it sort of just changes the atmosphere. So like that's something you guys can do with, I used Unity. I super recommend it. It's free as long as you're not gonna get paid for what you're making on it. And after that point, if you want, you can pay for the license, and then they take a small fee, like I think it's like 3%, something really tiny. and then you can publish on, I think, almost every single platform. So it's a super great tool. But what you can do is just go in and tweak, like change things just a little bit.
Other questions? Are there any questions about just, oh,
Oh, over here behind the
oh,
camera.
wow, that's, yeah,
ahead, right
thank
there.
you. This is like co-moderation, we need help here,
It's just
okay.
a question about the virtual reality games. Does it give a motion sickness?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, they're working on it, but there's an issue with latency, and so it does make you feel a little sick if you're going to be using it for a long time. And it also depends on the game. If there's a lot of movement around, like you don't want to be like your game being like, let's have a dance party, and you have to dance around like crazy as part of it. At least not yet. That's going to change really soon. The technology is changing so fast, and even the major headsets aren't going to be out until the beginning of 2016, and those are going to be infinitely better. Still make you a little sick sometimes, but that's going to be something that is changing and improving really quickly.
The way we've dealt with that for Time Machine is we set it underwater, and so that way the movement is a little more fluid, and so that way we don't have that jerky motion sickness inducing kind of movements. And so we set it underwater so it's a little more fluid and smooth.
That's brilliant. Actually, Ruben was telling me about that at the wedding I was telling you about the other day. And what I love about that is it shows such a nice, deep thinking about what the materiality of the technology is, right? And really thinking about, okay, how can we take something that, in one way you can look at it as a bug, like it causes a problem in the normal way we develop things, and turn it into a feature. Turn it into part of your creative process. It's like, okay, how can we make that actually an advantage of the story that we're telling, and use that to help move the story along? It's awesome.
That's beautiful. That makes me think about space games and other kind of spaces where you could use fluidity. Yeah, because it doesn't just have to be water. That's brilliant. Nice. I'm excited to try that out.
Yeah.
Another question here. Oh,
Sorry,
cool. Yeah.
we can just talk about it.
And
Let's
then
nerd out
I also have a question of the virtual reality. I was wondering, if you could include the games like Mario and Zelda into this, because then you could use that, and then underwater, like what your guys were adding over there. Yeah,
And
that'd be cool.
ultimately, I think what they've been saying is, what's really neat about virtual reality is people are having to think of new ways to interact with games. That they're, one of the first things that happened when virtual reality came out is everyone was like, okay, let's put a first-person shooter in virtual reality, because that's what we've always wanted to do, is shoot demons in first person. And just everyone couldn't handle it. and so it's forced a new way of thinking about how we interact with games and how we play games. And I think Minority's doing a really good job with that with Time Machine. They're really changing the way you sit in a game. And so just kind of taking a game and saying now let's make it virtual reality doesn't always work. There is I think it's Flappy Bird, a demo of someone did Flappy Bird in virtual reality, and it doesn't really work because it's too much motion that's not natural to the body, right?
And
so,
you look like a total idiot.
But what is happening?
I mean, really, everyone looks like a total idiot
Yeah,
while doing virtual reality.
What is happening in terms of classic games is Oculus just had a press conference with the Gear VR. They're releasing a classic arcade within a virtual reality headset. So you'll be in a headset, and it'll be like you're in an old arcade, and you're able to go up to a Pac-Man machine and play Pac-Man, kind of traditionally, but virtually, essentially, right? And so they're recreating the arcades, but I guess ultimately what VR requires is a new way to think about how we interact with games and how you're going to move and how you're going to do motion. So it's not unfortunately as simple as just translate, but that's part of the challenge and part of the beauty of it.
Cool. We've got another question.
I gotta ask this question.
Oh, yo.
I have this.
Oh, wow.
As a professional artist and a storyline that you come up with, what inspires you as far as muse?
It's been really interesting with us because, well, and actually that's an interesting question. We work with a bunch of really talented directors, and with virtual reality, we've been actually approaching different kinds of artists, not just traditional gamers or film directors, but also new media artists. And one project that we're working on, I can't really say who we're working on it with, but like they came up with an idea that we probably wouldn't have thought of, or a traditional director would have thought of, because they work as more in like electronic music, and they were like, hey, what if we kind of had your head move around, and that affects the sound that you're hearing, and you can kind of mix your own track and everyone can have that experience. And that's actually something that was relatively easy to do. So we kind of, and then we also do something, we work with traditional Inuit artwork as well, and we take artwork and then turn those into video games so that they can be kind of gallery installations, so you can see the actual artwork and then play the video games on an iPad that's in front of you. But yeah, so we kind of like just try and reach out and work with really cool people that are doing really neat things, and then interpreting that in video games and VR.
The one thing for us is we got our start in film, and so we still have that going, and right next door is Minority. And so it's two separate entities, but we found a way to work together. We work hard on story. We bring in writers, even for the games. There's one of the first games that we released, Papo and Yo. It's the president of Minority, Vander Caballero. He's a superstar in the gaming world. And so it's a game about his relationship with his dad, with his father, who was a great guy, but who turned into a monster when he got drunk. And so we worked with writers, we worked with people who do story to move that game along. And it got to the point where people who've had the same type of relationship with their parents or with their father, it touches them deeply once they finish that game. And so, there is a new era in terms of gaming, which is called empathy gaming, where you move beyond bigger guns, each year. I won't see what else grows, but and so I think we're in a new era in terms of gaming and where it can take you.
So one of the interesting things.
Is it working? Yeah, it is. There you go. It is very close, this one.
Okay,
I'm gonna have to eat the mic. With the workshops that we do, part of what happens in the first half of the workshop is we have storytellers and elders come in from the community, and they tell stories. And they talk about why they tell stories and why the stories are important, and they also talk about the craft of storytelling. And so we're doing this along with also giving them technical instruction on how to make a game. And then about halfway through the workshop, we basically say, okay, look, so now, we've talked a bunch about stories and we've learned some basics about what does it mean to make a game. Now you guys have to figure out what kind of game you're gonna make. And it's really quite magical. The first time that we did it, we didn't know, and we walked away. We're like, okay, we're done for now. It's up to you. These are 17, 18-year-olds. You guys gotta figure out what story you want to tell. And we didn't know what we'd find when we'd come back. We came back 2 months later because we had to take a break. And they had taken a table, actually sort of 4 tables the size of this thing right here, and they had put butcher paper down over the whole thing, and they had mapped out an entire world. And they had taken a character from this story and a conflict from this story over here, and a setting from another story that they had been told, and then made up some of their own stuff, and they created an entire universe to build an adventure game around. And we've done that in every subsequent workshop. And so there's one of the things we try to do in the workshops is we're trying to say, look, you know, in the Native community, a lot of times what you hear, particularly from the outside, is this sort of story of breakage and discontinuity, right? And sort of this idea that there's sort of like there's tradition over there, and then there's modern life over here. And part of what we're trying to do in the workshops, we're saying, no, this is continuous, right? Our histories are continuous, our people are continuous, and that they can draw upon that tradition and that history to create something that is completely of 2015, right? Or completely of, 2115. And that they're all part of the cultural heritage and inheritance that they have, that they can draw on to think about how they want to engage with the world now, right? And a big part, as you were saying, a big part of the way they want to engage with the world now is through games, right? And so they're creating new stories, right? They're creating new traditions through making these video games. And it's really amazing to see. Very hard sell at the very beginning of the project when we went to the cultural center, right? And tried to tell them, tried to explain to them we wanted to work with, youth to sort of translate old stories into video games. And they were like, you want our kids to make Grand Theft Res? Yeah. Right? Like, them trying to imagine what it meant to take these stories and put them into a video game, right? And
that
they said,
would
well,
be cool though, with a bike. Really awesome. You
well,
a bike?
yeah, well, Scalinati's always like, she's got to have that backward driving car, right?
Yeah.
From Smoke Signals in there. So that's a really amazing source of inspiration and stories is our traditions, right? And we can use those to infuse the games that we make, any of the art that we make, right? But because video games seem very modern, right, or VR seems very modern, sometimes I think there's a tendency to be like, that's of this world, right? It's not of our tradition, right? But we're making tradition, right? Our ancestors, our elders made the tradition when they came along, right? Drawing on their elders, right? And we're doing that, and now the youth are going to be doing the same thing, is making new tradition.
I would just like to expand on that, because we.
I'm going to take half your audience now, so I just want to.
Oh, okay.
I've been very fascinating and very eye-opening. I'm a teacher from Winston Churchill Collegiate, and I've got a group here that's half our anime club, a lot of big gamers. The other half are students from our NAC 10 course, which is, it's got a long new name, Expressing First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Culture.
Excellent.
Cool.
Awesome.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks for bringing them.
Thanks, guys.
So come back and try out the games.
And thank you.
Come back and build games.
Yeah.
I just wanted to expand on that too as like a source of inspiration. I mean, we also make non-Indigenous content, and I feel fine with that as an Indigenous person. But from being from Nunavut, we also take a lot of the Inuit myths, and I'm obsessed with horror. And Inuit myths are fucking scary. Oh, shit. So, the kids are gone. Right?
Now we can say what we mean.
Oh, no. You guys watch that movie. I haven't traumatized you, right? Okay. Sorry. But they're really darn scary. So we kind of reinterpret those by making horror films that are contemporary but are loosely based on our traditional myths. And we're also working on a new film that's with a group of like badass chicks. Sorry. On bikes that chase down monsters, but it's all based on a myth. And we're also making, it's like a tick I have, I just have to swear all the time. But we're also making like a cross-platform using that. So we're going to also make a VR experience that exists in the same world, and a video game as well that all kind of connect together with the film. Sorry.
That's fine. I think like the youth, the majority of youth left the room, and then things got really weird. So I'll speak a little bit about my inspiration. So I'm looking for Indigenous gameplay. I think we should be pushing further than just representations. I think that there are ways in which we can express ourselves through game mechanics. So for example, I worked on a board game with the Northwest Indian College, and the gameplay in there is centralized around generosity, gratitude, stewardship, and collaboration. Now you put that up against a bunch of other board games, we don't include things like you'd normally find: treachery, backstabbing, other actions like this. They just are not functional parts of the gameplay. So when we infuse our teachings, our ways of knowing, understanding our languages as being relational, and we find ways to express that through games, that's where I want to push. And in the limitations that I have, I'm working with board games, mobile games, games that are going to reach communities, as many people as possible. Because the hope for me is that we're not working on Unity, that we have our own game engine. We have something that we have built from the code up, so that we're working with our understanding of physics. We're working with our knowledge. What will we see then? Should I drop them?
Just the violence in the video, and I think that was fine. I guess that's my only turn off on the videos is such the violence, and that's my turn off on the videos. It really is.
Sure.
Well, that's the thing we had to negotiate with the community, or some parts of the community, was actually kind of doing a bit of a roadshow and showing them what the real diversity of video games is, right? And so what we tend to hear and see are the big AAA games, which historically have been tailored for a very narrow demographic, and which involves a lot of violence and destruction and so forth. But there's such an amazing variety of different kinds of video games out there, from larger studios as well as lots of independent stuff. And so I think that's part of it, is understanding that just like with movies, there's lots of really violent movies, but there's amazing movies, lots of really violent literature, but amazing literature as well. It's the same thing with video games, that there's a whole system, there's a whole ecology out there. And part of it is, is finding those other ones. It's becoming easier and easier through things like, Indiecade, and there's other places where you can go and find games that are really smart. They're really about empathy, right? They're really about getting people to, sort of have an emotional engagement that's a fuller, richer human engagement. So.
Yeah, and if you think about, so for example, one of the benefits of Assassin's Creed 3 coming out was when Ubisoft collaborated with the Mohawk community, their particular consultant actually. One of the aspects that got worked into the game was that when you kill an animal, the action built into your characters, when you walk to it, you're thanking. You're thanking that animal for its life. And it can become repetitive after a while because you're doing it over and over and over again, but the first time it happened, like, that hit me. That was it right there. I was like, okay, all right, this is what I'm looking for. So that, yes, there's violence. There's violence in our lives. How can there not be violence? There's violence in our homes, right? That's a reality for us day to day. So I think to risk pushing that away just because it is violence, we'll miss a lot of healing that needs to happen for our communities. So my hope would be to see violence integrated into ways that can be healing for players.
Now you can drop the mic.
Yeah.
I think we are actually out of time. Well, we're out of
She's
time.
sneaking up on you.
I don't want to break the mic. It'd be really cool if I could throw it, but I don't want to break it. So miigwech for coming, for being here, for taking time out of your day, and the amazingness that is Imaginative to be with us here. Please feel free to talk to each and every one of us. I will be running straight from here upstairs to a screening of an experimental animation that I developed by hand. just fun stuff to do. So I'll be right out, but please feel free to track us all down, and I'm sure all of us are in agreement when we say we are here as a resource and really look forward to all of the work that you also have underway. Thank you.
Oh, hi.